All right, back on a Young Turks. Now, we had juror B37. If you remember, she was one of the white jurors. There was 5 white jurors on the Zimmerman case and 1 minority juror, and B37 was among the white jurors, and she came out and spoke to the press anonymously, but, you know, her face was covered, of course, on Anderson Cooper's show, and she says some interesting things coming at it from Zimmerman's perspective, it seemed to us. Well, now a new juror's coming out, and you're seeing her right there. She's juror B29, and she talked to Robin Roberts on ABC. And she had a completely different perspective. And we know her first name, by the way, but she's not released her full name. She said, you could put the man in jail even though in our hearts, you couldn't put the man in jail, I should say, even though in our hearts we felt that he was guilty. So that's really interesting. She also said, George Zimmerman got away with murder. Wow. But you can't get away from God. And at the end of the day, he's going to have a lot of questions and answers he has to deal with. Let me just give you all of her quotes, and then we'll all discuss it with the panel here. She said, I was a juror that was going to give them the hung jury. I fought to the end. And finally, she said, you can't put the man in jail, even though in our hearts we felt he was guilty. But we had to grab our hearts and put it aside and look at the evidence. Our legal correspondent, Robin Sachs, is here. Of course, Colonel Morris Davis, Andrew Carell from Mediaite, Anna and JR. So, Robin, let me start with you. What's your reaction to the new juror?
You know, my reaction is that this is a juror who wanted in her heart to hang it up, felt that he was, guilty in her heart of murder, but actually followed the law. So I appreciate her comments as a juror, and as the interview we're going to hear more in depth tomorrow on Good Morning America, but little other tidbits out there seem to suggest she had a problem with the word intent and the intent aspect of the instruction. And I think that goes to a criminal justice problem, not a jury problem. Yeah,
I felt something very similar. I felt that if the first juror had come out and said this, I'd feel much better in a sense. Like, they saw the evidence, they felt terrible for what happened to Trayvon, but they just couldn't get over the legal, required amount of evidence, beyond a reasonable doubt. Chad, did you feel the same way or no?
As this second juror came on?
Like, this made, like, if they had all felt this way on the jury, then I could live with the decision a little better.
No, well, okay. You can at least live with the way they came to it. It doesn't mean that then the system is suddenly we feel good about it. Because that's part of the problem. I think it's the aspect of the disgruntled nature of many people for this decision, this verdict, was because of the way our jury system works and the way our judicial system works in the first place. When you know someone is guilty and you see it, but then the problem is I know so many things and there was something that showed me he was guilty, but the prosecution just didn't say it the way I'd like to hear it to really convince me. We're breezing over the reality of the situation.
You know what, can I offer some perspective here? One thing, there are more jury instruction, more cases that are overturned and reversed on appeal because of the definition of the reasonable doubt instruction. So what ends up happening in real courtrooms every day is that lawyers stay away from describing what reasonable doubt is because they're so scared that they're going to get overturned on appeal to describe it. But no one in the world knows what reasonable doubt is. Everyone's like, I'm reasonable. And there could have been a doubt, therefore it's reasonable doubt. But that's not what reasonable doubt is. And that instruction in and of itself is reason that the criminal justice system should be overhauled.
So, yeah, that's really interesting, because if you're sure he did it, then you've probably gotten beyond a reasonable doubt. She thought that they needed to prove that he had the intent to kill him. And on a manslaughter charge,
you don't.
I'm unclear on that. My sense of it, Robin, was that you didn't.
There's the difference between specific intent to kill and intent to cause harm and intent to do things and then have the general intent. And I'm not, because I don't have my jury instructions right in here in front of me, but I recall in the Florida instruction it being hairy that there was some intent language in there, or what sounded like intent in that manslaughter instruction as well.
All right. We actually have 2 prosecutors on the panel here. Colonel Davis, of course, is a prosecutor at Gitmo from 2005 to 2007. He was the chief prosecutor there. Colonel Davis, what did you make of the juror's impression of the charges? Did she come to the right conclusion based on what she thought?
Well, I was a little disappointed with her statement. It was like she was saying, boy, I came this close to doing the right thing, and I didn't quite get there. It was almost like she was trying to clear her own conscience by saying I came so close to finding him guilty and just couldn't do it. But I think at the end of the day, it's really an indictment of the criminal justice system here, because it's that whole law. I mean, self-defense has been around for centuries and centuries. And what we've done in recent years is tinker with it. You've always had the castle doctrine, where you have the right to defend your home, your castle. And if somebody kicks in the front door, you're not obligated to run out the back. But a lot of these states, particularly in the South, and I'm from North Carolina, and my state's following suit, trying to out-crazy the other southern states, they've taken that outside the home to where now you can be the aggressor, as George Zimmerman clearly was, and still have the right to claim self-defense. So I guess, I just don't know how you train your children to properly walk to the store and buy iced tea and Skittles.
Yeah. Jay-Z talked about that today, and I actually thought he made a terrific point. He said, why couldn't Trayvon stand his ground? Some guy comes up, he was clearly chasing him at one point, right? And so Trayvon stands his ground, and now they say, well, he had it coming if he got shot. Andrew, I understand the Second Amendment, and I understand the gun owners wanting to say protect their rights and all that stuff. We've heard it a million times. But what do non-gun owners, they don't have the same rights? They can't stand their ground? If they fight back, they can be killed, executed, and it's totally fine? I don't get it.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And actually, I think Kirsten Powers said something on Fox recently. She said that, what if Trayvon was standing his ground? Why didn't we consider that? I think she came down on the opposite side of most of the Fox commentators. It's an interesting question. Honestly, this whole case has been so murky for me, where it's just like I feel like everybody lets their emotions get in the way of sort of seeing it through, the legal lens. And then I agree that this does sort of indict the criminal justice system a bit, and that perhaps that the legalese got in the way of making a decision that may have been more truthful. But the interesting thing about what she said, though, that I haven't heard yet, you haven't brought up, is that she also said something about how she doesn't think the case should have been brought to trial, which is bizarre, because it sounds like she really thinks that there should have been justice and Zimmerman should have been convicted of murder, but she also thinks that it should have gone to trial. I was really confused by that. I don't know if you saw that. But.
Yeah, well, you guys are all right, because as you hear from both of the jurors, you're like, wow, there's a lot of misunderstandings about how the system works, but these were the people that had the power to make this decision. Now, when you go back to juror B37, I want to show you a clip here, because she came at it from a totally different perspective. And then would it have been different if there was a different mix-up, a different mix of people, I should say, within the jury? So let's watch her again.
When you lay your head tonight on the pillow, in your heart and in your head, you are 100% convinced that George Zimmerman, in taking out his gun and pulling the trigger, did nothing wrong.
I'm 101% that he should have done what he did, except for the things that he did before.
You mean he shouldn't have gotten out of the car, he shouldn't have pursued Trayvon Martin, but in the final analysis, in the final struggle...
When the end came the end...
He was justified.
He was justified in shooting Trayvon Martin.
Wow. And the new juror says that she couldn't sleep for days. She feels terrible for Trayvon Martin's family. She feels like she's now been sucked into this case and now partly responsible for Trayvon's death since she didn't find him guilty. So what a totally different perspectives here. And Anna, as I look at that, I think, would it have been different? I mean, what Robin mentioned earlier is this juror said, I wanted to have a hung jury. I hung in there for a long time saying that I don't agree, I don't agree. That if instead of being 5-1 in terms of a racial makeup, it was 3-3, and you had three perspectives saying, relating to the Martin family and 3 relating to Zimmerman. I know, and it doesn't necessarily break down on race, except it did in this case, at least with the 2 jurors that we know of.
I don't think that it's surprising at all that it broke down on race, because you have a unique perspective with the one juror who's a minority. Because think about it, if you are a white person living in this area in Florida, you have a very different experience than a black person living in this area in Florida. You see what I'm saying? If you have children, your children have had a different experience. So I don't know where the prosecution was when it came to picking jurors. I don't know if they were asleep at the wheel or what happened, but I really feel like it would have been a more interesting case, and it might have been a better outcome if they had more minorities on the jury.
It could have been, but also I think you hit the nail on the head. This woman is a mom to 8 children. Juror B37 has no children. So maybe it's not about race. Maybe it's being a parent.
Right, and that's why you need a diversity on the jury, not just racial, but all around, so they have different perspectives and they can see each other's perspective. All right, we got to leave it right there. Thank you, Robin. Now, when we come back, we're going to have a really interesting conversation with Warren Buffett's son. Well, did you know that Warren Buffett basically doesn't give anything to his kids? And so this guy, Peter Buffett, has a really interesting perspective on philanthropy, too. Fascinating. Come back, let's show you.